Hi and welcome. I am about to call Bridget Watson-Payne, who is our brand new faculty member in Sketchbook School, because we have a course coming up with her, and that is all about art. And not about making art, but it's about art appreciation. And I could explain all that, but she has written a book about that. So I'll just call her and I'll ask her everything about it and about the course. So let's bring her on. Hi, Bridget.
Hello!
Hi, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be doing this.
So am I. It's great that you're here. And first of all, I love your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's the illustrator Lucy Halcombe made it, and it's amazing. It has New York foods all over it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I don't even know where to start. I mean, you are our new teacher in our new course called How Art Can Make You Happy. And that's actually also the name of your book. So maybe we can start there. You wrote that book. Can you tell me a little bit about the book?
Yes, so I'm an art book editor. That's my job, my day job when I'm not writing books or making art myself. And I noticed that maybe because my job title is senior editor of art publishing for Chronicle Books Publishing Company, it sounds maybe sort of daunting, or like I spend all my time, hobnobbing with art galleries or something. Whenever I would talk to anybody just casually, at a party or coffee, about art, every conversation, people would express so much guilt and anxiety. Either they did love art, they already loved art, but they felt horrible that they weren't making more time for it in their busy lives. Oh, I meant to make it out to that big show at the museum, but I didn't make it and then it closed. I feel so bad. Or they'd always wanted to spend more time looking at art, get more into art appreciation, but they were intimidated or they didn't get it. They felt confused. They felt daunted. They worried that it wasn't for them. Because they didn't, have an art history background or degree or whatever it is. There was so much sort of fear and anxiety around it, and it always upset me. It made me really sad because I didn't, though I'm an art book editor, I didn't go to art school. I'm most largely self-taught, and I sort of felt like art is a really big source of joy for me personally, and it should be for other people. Art should not be making you anxious and upset. It should be making you happy. So that's how I came to write this book, How Art Can Make You Happy, which is available wherever books are sold from Chronicle Books. Plug for the book.
Plug it more, because it's an awesome book.
It's a beautiful little package, and I'm so happy with how it came out. And then I sent a copy to Danny Gregory, who's my author. I've edited his books in the past, and we're friends. And I sent him, I was like, hey, it's my new book. And he really liked it. And we got talking about what if we did it as a course for Sketchbook School, which I think is an interesting idea because it seems like from, what I know of your guys' other classes, it's a bit of a departure. It's not about how to make art or draw. It's about how to go out in the world, or not, how to maybe sit home in your pajamas and look at art and enjoy looking at art, which I think also can then feed back into creativity and art making. You can get inspired from what you see out in the world and then bring that back to what you're gonna make.
Then you actually started to script all that for a course, design a course actually. How did you find that whole track of creating a course?
It was interesting because I've written books. I work with writing a lot, but I had never written anything for video before. This was a totally new experience for me. So it was basically taking the basic concepts that are in the book that I wanted to talk about, things about, like, for example, how to visit art museums, how to visit art galleries, how to look at art, public art out in the world, how to look at art, like I said, at home in your PJs. All these different sort of aspects of how, and also why do we want to do this? What benefit are we going to get from it? Turning those concepts that I had talked about in the book into a class, and figuring out, what words make sense on the book, on paper, on a page might be different than what words are going to make sense in this video forum where I'm, talking out loud. And it was really interesting to sort of work with Danny and do edits and get the scripts into a place where they actually were scripts and not a book. It was a fun writing task.
Right. It's super exciting because the course is very, very different from any other course we've done in sketchbook school yet. Even the way it was produced, I mean, you went to a green screen studio, which must have been so weird to be standing around in like everything is green, and then later on there will be a compositor actually putting things around you and on you and under you.
It was amazing. It's amazing. Both the experience of shooting the course and then what you guys did with it are both just mind-blowing to me. So I made a special weekend trip to New York and went to the studio, and I live in San Francisco, so, jetted over there, filmed the class all in one day in front of the green screen, which makes you feel like a movie star because you feel like you're in, Star Wars or something, some sci-fi, they're going to put the Lord of the Rings behind you or something, that's the only time we see that green screen things with like big budget CGI. Here I am standing in front of the green screen. It's kind of amazing and trippy, and hair and makeup, like the whole deal. And then to see what that footage has now been turned into, I think people are gonna kind of have their minds blown. I mean, I have a little bit with like everything that happens. Yeah, like you're saying, sort of in front, behind, around, animation, all the background. Suddenly I'm in front of the Louvre. Suddenly I'm in a coffee shop. Suddenly I'm, all these places. It's really cool. And I think it is really different than anything I've seen in sketchbook school, but it's different than anything I've seen anywhere.
But also your book, I've never read anything like it. And I love it so much because your book actually made me, in a very recent city trip, it made me just go inside of, there was this whole street with a lot of galleries in there, And I always am like, well, it's not for me. If I go in there, the people who run it will know that I'm not going to buy anything. So can I go in? And your book actually made me, I think I went into 3 galleries and I had a really nice talk with the owner, and I learned about one of the artists because I really liked the small sculpture they had. It was awesome.
No one was mean to you, right? No one kicked you out. Like, you're allowed to be there.
Of course. And I think the way you describe like that feeling of guilt or that feeling of feeling intimidated or something like that, I recognize that also from making art. Like, it makes you feel good. It is so much fun, but am I allowed to do it? There's really like, it's the same thing.
Yeah, there's that whole imposter syndrome thing where whether it be making art or going into a gallery or doing all of these different things, we have these little voices in our heads that are telling us like, oh no, you're not really fancy enough and important enough to do that. That's not for you, and it's like, says who? Only according to the mean little voice in your own head, not according to anybody else. So
that's what I really like. You make it so accessible, and it is accessible. And the playfulness and the fun really, really helps all of that. So I think that it turned out really great, and I'm really curious to see how people will experience it.
I am too.
So if you're already making art, then how will this course help you, do you think?
In writing the book and then in adapting the book, into the course, I really wanted to make something that would work for a couple different situations, for a couple different sort of kinds of people. There are the people who already self-identify as art lovers, who they love art, maybe they make art, they like to look at art, they care about art, this is a passion for them. But those people often are the ones who are carrying around the most guilt and anxiety and fear and worry that they're not doing it right, that there's some way they're supposed to be doing these things that they're not doing, and there's a lot of baggage that can come with it. So I wanted to make something that would work for those people who are already the art people, but they have issues, which we almost all do. And then also, on the other hand, something that would explain, a really nice point of entry for people who have relatively little experience with art appreciation or with looking at visual art. Maybe they do draw, maybe they make their own art, but they didn't go to art school, they didn't grow up in a family that took them to art museums, what have you. They'd like to start going to the museum, going to the gallery, doing all of that, but they feel daunted, intimidated, they don't know where to start. So whether it's something you want to be doing more of and don't feel like you're doing enough of or correctly, or whether it's something you're not doing and want to get into, my hope is that the course should work for either one. There are probably a few basics for the entry-level person that the slightly more experienced person might not need, but those go by pretty quickly, and there's, I think, a lot to be gained for either one.
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example from the course for the different levels?
Yeah. For example, when I talk about how to visit art museums, on the one hand, I do give some basic, really practical information about, okay, if you're planning a visit to a museum and you have a limited amount of time, and do you try and see the whole museum, or do you focus in on just parts of it? And that, which of those things you're going to do is going to depend on certain factors that I go into in the class. How do you use wall text? How do you use audio guides? All of these really practical nuts and bolts things that if you are already at least a sporadic museum goer, you may not need that information. You may already know that stuff, but if this is new to you, it'll be handy information. On the other hand, so that's sort of the basic level. And then kind of the next level up is a little more psychological. I talk a lot about big blockbuster museum shows, the ones that are advertised on the sides of city buses and on big banners. And if you live in a city with a major museum and, the big Matisse show has come to town, you can't miss, all your cultured friends are talking about how they went on the opening night and it's so great and blah, blah, blah. And you're feeling guilty because you haven't made it around to the thing yet. And so for those slightly more experienced, but also slightly more guilty feeling people, I basically create sort of a little bit of a rubric or a flow chart of how to figure out whether or not you actually want to go to this thing or not. And if you do want to go, how to make the time. And if you don't want to go, how to just let go of the notion that you should and get over it. So there's sort of practical basics for newbies and a little bit more soul searching for those of us who have caught in our own heads.
Those are really good examples. And what I also really like is that you really, really emphasize on the fun. Because sometimes it's so serious, You might feel like you need to be specialized or you need to have studied about it or know about that time period or whatever. And you really emphasize on just going to a museum and then looking at art and then see what it does to you, how you feel about it. And that is actually all that you need to know about the piece of art, I think. And that makes it a lot more fun because then you approach it in such a different way, I think.
One of the most important things with that has to do with keeping an open mind, because going to look at art, it can be super weird, it can be funny, it can be fun, it can be serious. Some art is very upsetting, and maybe that's a good thing. It's making you feel like that if you go with an open mind and sort of, for lack of a less cheesy way of saying this, but an open heart, that if you're ready to feel feelings, if you're ready to let whatever emotions are coming off of this art in and feel them, that it might make you feel kind of upset. It might make you feel scared. It might make you feel confused. It might make you feel delighted, all of these possibilities. If you go in with an attitude of just I don't know, I don't get it, it's weird, or, oh, I'm so daunted, I don't know enough, this is big and important, intimidating, and not for me, then you might not have a great experience. But if you go in with an open mind, if you go in ready to let the art affect you, then you have the potential to have a real, genuine reaction to it. Even if sometimes that reaction is oh, I don't like this, it's not for me. That's fine. You're figuring out your own taste and what you respond to. And then I think it's sort of in math, an order of operations kind of a question. After you've discovered what you respond to, then you very well may want to go and get more information, find out about this artist, read a book, discover, information online about them, watch a documentary, whatever. If you get excited about someone, that makes it fun and interesting to learn about them rather than feeling like you're in a course where you have to just do the assigned reading or something.
Yeah, know everything about all the different time periods in classic art and that kind of stuff. And maybe you're not into that. You like modern art. Or the other way around, you're like, you look at modern art and you're like, why is this art? Is that a legitimate question to ask? Like, why is this in an art museum?
It is. There's a great, oh, I can't remember who said it, but there's a great quote from a modern artist. Oh, I wish I could remember who, but said, modern art equals I could have done that plus, yeah, but you didn't.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Like that a lot of times it's not, I mean, when you see something like a Jackson Pollock or something where the execution, yes, many people could potentially like use their hand to execute something that might be somewhat similar, but the fact that this person was the first person to think of that, to sort of break through notions of what a painting could be, that there's so much innovation. We often have to kind of cast our minds backwards and think about what this meant at the time. I've often found that with Impressionism, whereas we've all seen Impressionist paintings so many times. You see them on the walls, like at your dentist office, and like on a coffee cup, like on a mouse pad, just like you just reproductions, and it just becomes like wallpaper, like just like, yeah, water lilies, Monet, yeah, I've seen it we've all seen it a million times. But when you actually go and see it in person, if you think about how revolutionary it was at that time, what other painting at that time or just before looked like, and how these people were just cracking wide open the notion of like what art could be, you can get really excited about it and think, oh wait, hold on, it's whatever it seems like to us now, that is not what it was then. So I think that's a lot of what I want people to do is kind of find new and fun ways to approach what they may have seen before and not, thought about. Like,
Right, right. And I think museums do that a lot. Like they will collect certain paintings, for example, from a certain time period that have a theme. So they will get from other museums, they will get it all, and then it has a theme. Like I saw something that will be exhibited here in the Netherlands, like all kinds of paintings from the Golden Age that are about humor. So the humor from then, and then you can really see that it's so different. The things that people laughed about back then, some of them are still similar. We will just smile right when we see it, and others are like complex or weird or
why was it funny?
yeah. And I think that's really interesting to see it in to learn about that, about the people back then, and to see the art through the artist's eyes as well, the world of the artist. That's really what you see if you look at art, right?
Right. That's one of the things I talk about in one of the very first lessons in the class is what art can do for us and why looking at art is valuable, is that it can make us think and it can make us feel and it can make us see and it can make us have empathy, both for the people around us now and as we connect to, people from the past, the emotions that are in the art. There's a lot of human connection that can happen through looking at art.
Yeah. And you make art yourself too, right?
I do. I do.
So, how do you use your experiences of going to museums, to galleries? How do you use that in your sketchbook? Do you translate it into your sketchbook, or?
Yeah, I think that the art that I gravitate towards when I'm out in the world, when I go to a museum or a gallery or whatever, there are certain things, I talk about this briefly in the class, there are certain things that I personally gravitate towards, and one of them is color. I am, in general, both in art and just like in life, drawn to really vibrant colors and start, really what might even can be considered clashing, like stark color contrasts. All of that just like makes my brain kind of light up in exciting ways. So I find that I'm drawn to that when I look at art. I'm drawn to that also when I buy clothing or whatever, just, pillows, I don't know, the world. But also the thing that I started really drawing again seriously about 3 years ago. I had always drawn, but I'd kind of gotten out of the habit, and I really got back into it in a big way a few years back. And it was when I realized I started drawing on colored cardstock. So I started using colored backgrounds instead of white. And something about that for me was just like a breakthrough where I realized, like, oh, I can bring all of these like jarring color contrasts that I love so much into what I'm going to make, as opposed to, often when you learn how to draw, it's like pick up a pen, draw on a sketchbook. It's a black line on a white page. And that was never quite as exciting to me as when I found ways to sort of incorporate what I loved out in the art world into my own work. And that was sort of what inspired me. So
you can take out of it whatever you want, of course. And I think that's what people might be, asking, like, how do you incorporate this into your sketchbook? But I think it's true. You just find a color palette, or you find themes, or
it's really personal. It might be subject matter. It might be media. I mean, I think one of the things that excites people and helps people with their own art making is often trying different art media. That they've tried sketching with a pencil and it's never excited them that much. But I just talked to an illustrator the other day who recently started working really, really big with a brush and ink. So she got this big paper and these big Japanese brushes and black ink, and just everything she makes is now huge. And it's illustration, so she can shrink it down, on the computer if she wants to make it smaller. But that for her was this breakthrough of, oh, if I can do, these huge sweeping gestures with my arm, like suddenly I'm so inspired, so sometimes it's seeing a new art media that you haven't thought of before. Maybe you want to try ceramics, maybe you want to try, who knows what. So that can be a point of inspiration, subject matter, color palette. Also, and I talk about this a bit in my class, looking at other people, looking at art is interesting. Like when you're in the museum and you watch the other museum patrons walking around, what they're drawn to, what they stop to talk to their friend about, what they walk right past and ignore, that's also can be an interesting and fruitful. I know an artist who does drawings of people in museums looking at art and they're great, so things like that. One of those old-fashioned art instruction techniques that people don't use as much anymore, but back in the day when you were learning how to make art, you went to the museum and you copied the old masters. You found a painting on the wall and you drew it. And that's also another like interesting possibility, is sketching in museums.
Absolutely.
Just by studying how people did what they did, especially if it's something you like and you're drawn to, really examining, well, how did they achieve that?
Right. Yeah, so there's many ways we can get inspired. And I think that is really great because in sketchbook school, in the community, a lot of people get inspired by each other's sketches and sketchbooks. But this takes it to such a different kind of level of inspiration, because those sketchbooks are amazing, but seeing art like in person, a sketchbook doesn't contain that rich pointillism or, the impressionism, that kind of stuff, or cubism. It doesn't have that, or those big gestures. You only see that if you see the art in real life. So that will really make it will open a different kind of inspiration. That's what I think I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a big advocate of, like you were saying at the beginning, of going to art galleries. That even if you don't find museums intimidating, almost everybody finds art galleries intimidating. Like if it's just like, there's no one in there and it's big and white and empty and you're going to expect me to spend like thousands and thousands of dollars on some piece of art, and that it's daunting. But it's also this never-ending, constantly rotating source of free, absolutely 100% free art that you can go look at, open to the public. Anyone can go in there. And like you were saying, maybe they completely ignore you, or maybe they chat with you, or whatever. It doesn't matter. They know that people just come in there to take a look. They absolutely know that, and it's completely normal. So, and that's also cool because it's art that in many cases is not something you wouldn't see otherwise. When you go to a major museum, you're going to see art by artists that you've probably heard of, that are kind of household names. Like, oh, look, it's a Picasso. Like, you already kind of knew what a Picasso looked like, from reproductions and whatever, even if you've never seen one in person before. Now, like you were saying, seeing it in person is really different and really exciting to see the brush strokes, to see the size. There's really no replacement for those originals. But at the same time, when you go into a gallery, it's probably an artist you've never heard of, or a bunch of artists you've never heard of, or never seen their work before. And it's just like this endless, it's almost like the real life equivalent of, scrolling through Instagram or Pinterest or something, where you've got this endless supply of digital visual inspiration, but this is out in the real world.
It's true. Yeah, I like it. I like that analogy. Yeah, and just one more thing, especially if you're learning about different artists, I always have such a hard time with names. But you have some really simple techniques, I think I can call it, to remember.
Yeah, I always really struggled, and I still do, frankly, with remembering artist names. I would see work I loved, I would know I loved it, I would want to remember it later. And yes, at the time you can like snap a photo on your phone of the name, or you can write it down. But later when you want to talk to someone, you want to be able to say off the cuff, like, oh, I was at the museum and I saw these pieces by Robert Motherwell and they were like so amazing and I love them so much. But I would often be like, I saw these pieces by, I don't know, some dude, I forget his name, And so I actually did some research. I studied up. I was like, okay, this is not an insolvable problem. Like, there are people who are memory experts. They have like memory competitions. Like, there are people who are like basically athletes, the Olympians of memory. Like, how do they do it? How do people who are good at this do it? And it turns out all the techniques they use are goofy. Like, they are so silly. It's like all making up silly little rhymes or little jingles or mnemonics, things with alliteration, all of these techniques where you make up something that's basically so funny and dumb that it will never leave your head. It's like the equivalent of, like an advertising jingle that you'll get stuck in your head and that will never go away. I mean, I remember ad jingles from TV in the 1980s. They are still taking up space in my brain when I want to be able to remember the name of that artist, and I can't. So it's making up those catchy, there's a reason advertising sounds the way it does. It's because it's catchy and you're going to remember it. And, that's like brain science. So finding those little hooks that are going to catch in your brain. And then when you need it, you're just like, oh, Agnes Martin, boom, done. Like, never going to forget that one. Yeah. So it's very silly and slightly embarrassing, but it's really fun.
Yeah, it is silly, but I think it invites you to be creative again on another level. So I think it's a great idea. So yeah, all right. I kind of picked your brain on many levels, I feel, and I don't want to give away too much of the course.
No.
And you gave away just a few snippets and insights. I am just really looking forward to take it. I mean, I have watched the videos many times already, but I'm just as well going to take it again once we have launched it, because I want to experience it with the Sketchbook School community. I'm curious to know how you will experience it as well. Are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated to see what people take away from it, what they like, what they say, what's working, what's not working, because I mean, it's the difference between doing something like this on an online platform versus writing a book. When you write a book, it's kind of in a vacuum. I mean, you might get, you might get some reviews or something where someone says what's good or bad about it, but for the most part, I don't know what someone thinks when they're sitting in their house reading my book. I have no way of knowing that. Whereas something that's more or less, real time, online, live conversation, I can really get feedback and find out, like what happens when people use these techniques in the real world. I know how it works for me, but what are others' experience, of them? So I hope it's helpful, and I'm really excited to see, how it goes.
Well, I'm sure it's helpful, and I'm really looking forward to it. So make sure to sign up for How Art Can Make You Happy, and get the book too, because it's awesome.
I recommend both. Yeah, because there's things in the class that aren't in the book, and there's things in the book that aren't in the class. So
Yeah, so they will go together really, really well. And I think it's also a class that you can get back to many times and learn new things again or be reminded by certain things. So, yeah, it'll be an awesome class. So, do you have any parting thoughts or anything you want to share or ask or?
no, I'm really excited and grateful and feeling really good about it, and I can't wait to see it really be out there in the world. I kind of can't believe it, so I'm excited.
Very soon it will. All right, well, then we'll see each other in class.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.